We have reached the final days of filming season 5. Come over here right now. Look at this. Look at this. This is the last day, and what they're doing right now is they're setting up for the final scene to be filmed.
What if, in the middle of a tightly controlled film set, everything stopped? Not because of a mistake, but because something unexplainable took over? During the filming of the most sacred scene in The Chosen, Jonathan Roumie, the man behind Jesus, encountered a moment so intense it left even the cameras unsure whether to keep rolling. This wasn't a scripted pause. This wasn't acting. And what happened next left the crew in stunned silence. Was it exhaustion, emotion, or something else? Roumie later said, "God spoke to me."
Remember when I sent you out 2 by 2?
How could we forget?
I told you to take no money.
But what really happened at that table, under studio lights, surrounded by silence, might change how you see faith, film, and the fine line between them. Jonathan Roumie's collapse. During the filming of the Last Supper scene in The Chosen's 5th season, a moment unfolded that no one on set anticipated. As the cameras rolled and the cast delivered their lines with the usual precision, Jonathan Roumie, who portrays Jesus, suddenly broke down. He had just begun delivering one of the most well-known lines in Christian scripture when his voice faltered, his body tensed, his breathing became uneven, and he visibly struggled to hold back tears. Without warning, he stopped speaking entirely. The silence that followed wasn't part of the script. It was the result of an actor overwhelmed beyond the boundaries of his role. Roumie's immediate physical and emotional reaction caught everyone off guard. His shoulders shook slightly, and his eyes welled up before he fully stepped out of character, his expression revealing something deeper than scripted emotion. His collapse wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, internal, and deeply disarming. He brought his hand to his chest, almost as if to steady himself, but it was clear that he couldn't go on. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds before it became obvious to the crew and cast that the scene couldn't continue. He didn't call for a break, nor did he try to recover quickly. Instead, he remained still, as though frozen by the weight of the moment. The shooting has been halted immediately. The crew, who are all known to be accustomed to the emotional scenes, were all frozen at that moment in uncertainty, as well as the director, sound team, cameramen, and set assistants. No teaching took place, no whispering cues. Some exchanged glances, not knowing if they should interfere or just stand quietly waiting. The meticulously choreographed scene had become a suspended moment of confusion and concern. Makeup artists and their assistants took several steps back, not willing to get in the way of what seemed to be a deep, personal crisis for the actor. Rumors later spread across Hollywood that Roumie had suffered something much worse than just emotional exhaustion, that he had a meltdown due to some spiritual or supernatural cause. In that moment, however, there was no such speculation taking place on the set. Simply an audience watching an actor who could no longer go on. Performance interrupted by a force within himself. This kind of thing, the people witnessing it would definitely describe as raw and unsettling theatrical, not rehearsed. It was a sudden fracture in the rhythm of production marked not by chaos, but by a quiet shock that no one saw coming. What no one expected was how the silence left behind would begin to change the very air around them. Set transformation. Even before the first lines of dialogue were spoken during the Last Supper scene in The Chosen, something began to shift on set. The usual buzz that precedes a take, rustle of crew movement, last-minute adjustments, the faint hum of equipment gave way to an unnatural stillness. Technicians found themselves moving more slowly, as though instinctively quieting down. The lighting, carefully designed to reflect the somber tone of the scene, seemed to cast a deeper, softer glow than expected. What had been a technical environment of rigging, cues, and coordination began to feel weighted with something harder to define. As the cast took their places around the table, the usual mechanical rhythm of production slowed to a crawl. Camera operators steadied their hands with extra care, while makeup artists stepped back earlier than usual, unwilling to disturb the delicate calm. No one announced the change, yet everyone adjusted to it. The room's temperature hadn't shifted, but many later said the air felt thicker, more charged, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Light bounced off the wood and fabric with an almost painterly softness, lending the space a quiet reverence that hadn't been present in rehearsals. The silence became almost a defining characteristic of the change. Not the well-practiced silence before a dramatic moment, but one that existed long before the dreaded action. Footsteps were softened, whispers ceased, and all ambiances that lit up the place fell down to a mute. The entire set seemed to shift into some ethereal realm, that very same set, but with a wholly different emotional vibration. The set pieces, the markers of a television set, were still there, but they now faded into nothingness before an air of forbiddance. It was almost instinctual that time itself began to crawl, instead of moving at a pace predetermined by the director. The strange happenings are being whispered later on, that some supernatural thing has descended upon the set on that day, and it changes the mood without warning. Believers or non-believers of these claims, the change of atmosphere was felt by everyone. Long before the camera captured the first close-up, long before the actors spoke their lines, the place had changed. A soundstage from a studio lot did not feel like a soundstage anymore. It was like something in between places, out of ordinary time. Those standing behind monitors or adjusting props felt that change. The set was no longer just a set. Roumie's internal spiritual encounter. Jonathan Roumie has portrayed Jesus for several seasons in The Chosen, but what he experienced during the filming of the Last Supper scene went far beyond anything he had previously encountered. In multiple interviews, Roumie described feeling an overwhelming spiritual weight descend upon him in the middle of the scene, so powerful that it disrupted his ability to speak. According to him, it wasn't a matter of forgetting lines or being overcome by emotion. It was as if he had stepped aside internally, and someone else was now occupying that space. He said it felt like Jesus himself had taken over, not in metaphor, but in an indescribably real and direct way. The moment wasn't planned, and it certainly wasn't acted out. Roumie didn't anticipate it, nor did he control it. He later explained that his body and voice were present, but it felt as though he had become merely a vessel. He struggled to articulate the experience, often pausing mid-sentence when asked about it, unable to reduce it to language. "I wasn't performing," he said. "I was being moved." He recalled a sudden stillness washing over him, so complete that even breathing felt sacred, as if he were treading on spiritual ground too holy for performance. Whatever occurred during those minutes, Roumie was convinced it had nothing to do with technique. The following days after the scene were spent by Roumie attempting to reflect on what had happened. He journaled, prayed, and fought with a mixture of awe, confusion, and gratitude within himself. It wasn't just a brush with inspiration. It was deeper, more personal, and ultimately, more transformative. He didn't explain it later because that would just convey a distilled doctrine or a theological explanation. He just said that it marked him, referring to the experience. "It changed how I see myself, not just as an actor, but as someone trying to follow Christ," he confessed. "It was like being reminded who this is really about, and that I'm not in control of it." This scene broke Roumie's faith in his personal involvement. Even though he indulged greatly in the role spiritually, whatever proceeded in the filming of The Last Supper went beyond that. It had much more to do with surrender, rather than pretending as if imitating Jesus. Roumie ceased to view himself simply as an interpreter of a narrative. He saw himself momentarily as a participant in the mystery. Crew reactions and testimonies. As the Last Supper scene unfolded on the set of The Chosen, it wasn't just the actors in front of the camera who were affected. Those behind the scenes felt something shift as well. Camera operators, lighting techs, and sound engineers, many of whom had worked on countless productions, found themselves unusually moved. A stillness spread through the crew, not out of obligation but from something they couldn't quite name. Seasoned professionals who were used to high-pressure environments and emotionally charged scenes instinctively paused their tasks. The usual post-take chatter was replaced by silence, not from direction, but from something that held them in quiet reverence. One particularly striking reaction came from a longtime sound technician known among the team for being openly skeptical of faith. After one of the takes, he quietly approached a production assistant and, according to those present, whispered, "I don't believe in any of this, but today I felt something. I don't know what it was, but it was real." His comment quickly made its way around the set, not as gossip, but as a shared moment of wonder. Others, equally unaccustomed to religious language, simply nodded when asked if they had sensed anything unusual. Words were scarce, but expressions of emotion were everywhere. Tears silently shed, arms crossed in quiet contemplation, and hands unconsciously resting over hearts. Later on, many cast members would share that during the shoot, even the pauses and glances felt too sacred to break. Elizabeth Tabish, who played Mary Magdalene.
My name is Elizabeth Tabish. I play Mary Magdalene on The Chosen. She is one of Jesus's followers and disciples. I mean, not officially a disciple, but she is.
Was said to have stayed glued to the table long after the scene wrapped, looking at nothing in particular. "I didn't want to speak," she told one crew member. "It felt like we've stepped into something holy." This sentiment wasn't limited to the believers. Some extras, having no previous association with the show, would later admit to feeling emotionally overcome. Their inability to explain why seemed unreal. Some even begged to come back to the set to just sit in that same space again. Rumors even suggested later on that something supernatural had entered the room that day, and while not everyone believed it, few could deny the emotional charge that lingered. The set, busy with constant motion and instruction, had turned into a place of shared stillness. It was as if all cast and crew members, regardless of beliefs, had participated in something beyond the script. For a few quiet moments, no one acted, stage directed, or observed. They just sat in silence together. Dallas Jenkins's directorial surrender. Dallas Jenkins, the creator and director of The Chosen, is known for his meticulous attention to detail and hands-on approach to every scene. He's often described by cast and crew as someone who knows exactly what he wants and doesn't hesitate to call out even minor inconsistencies. But during the filming of the Last Supper scene in Season 5, something shifted in his usual directing style. As the scene unfolded and an unexpected emotional intensity began to swell, Jenkins made a conscious choice not to interrupt it. Rather than stepping in to refine blocking or correct timing, he let the moment play out in full silence. Observing instead of directing, the decision not to call cut went against his natural instincts. Jenkins later reflected that everything in him as a filmmaker wanted to step in, to shape the moment, reset lines, or capture an alternative take. But something held him back. In interviews following the event, he said, "There are times when the scene is no longer yours, and you just have to let go." For a director used to orchestrating each beat of a performance, this surrender marked a turning point. Instead of asserting control, he simply allowed the weight of the moment to take its course. Believing something deeper than the script, was unfolding. Internally, Jenkins grappled with the paradox about what his position really was. He had created the very framework of the scene, scripted it, and assembled a team, all the while feeling more like an outsider looking into a scene that had been improvised. Later, he would say that he felt someone was directing the scene. He does not strictly assign it to chance or feeling. It felt aware, even intentional. There were hints that he had a quasi-spiritual experience that day, though he never completely owned it. What he could stand by was that stepping back was the only appropriate answer. At times, he said, the strongest direction is when you know when to be quiet. This last day at the set was different from all the previous days in production of The Chosen. Jenkins, who normally would review multiple takes and give serious feedback, barely spoke during the Last Supper filming. Instead of the usual filming, playback, and then adjustments, what he viewed was an eerily still pose while he directed.
This show is way better than I am, and that's a really cool feeling. I was ultimately born to be a filmmaker. I come from a storytelling family. I love telling stories. I love making people feel something.
He trusted what was happening in front of the camera, even if it went against some preconceived notions. This was one of those rare times for quiet surrender when the story told itself in a career about storytelling. While the director stepped back in silence, one actor was stepping deeper into something far more demanding, behind the scenes. Roumie's spiritual preparation. Jonathan Roumie's portrayal of Jesus in The Chosen is not something he takes lightly, and his preparation for the pivotal Last Supper scene was the culmination of years of spiritual discipline. Far beyond script memorization or method acting, Roumie's process was rooted in a quiet, consistent effort to align himself with the role on a spiritual level. In the weeks leading up to filming, he intensified his personal practices, rising early to spend time in prayer, fasting regularly, and limiting his contact with the outside world. He has shared that, in order to portray Jesus with authenticity, he felt the need to empty himself of anything that might distract or distort the moment. This sense of spiritual detachment wasn't spontaneous. It had been cultivated over several seasons. From the earliest episodes, Roumie adopted a routine of daily prayer before stepping on set. But as the narrative drew closer to the Passion and the Last Supper, his sense of responsibility deepened. He began to distance himself even further from social media, entertainment, and casual conversations on set. He reportedly spent his off hours in solitude, often reading scripture or journaling in silence. The decision wasn't out of superstition or artistic flair, but a deeply felt conviction that the weight of the role demanded more than performance. It required personal sanctification. He also made use of pastoral support in his preparation for the role. Roumie kept close contact with a spiritual director who provided guidance, prayer, and accountability during filming. The crew members reported that there were days Roumie would ask to meet with his spiritual director even before stepping onto the soundstage. There were also rumors that he sometimes led small prayer circles outside his trailer, even though the production never officially acknowledged them. Undoubtedly, these faith-based mentoring sources provide Roumie with some kind of spiritual structure for his work, to keep him grounded in some of the heavy scenes. Roumie put in intentional efforts to safeguard himself from what he deemed worldly distractions. In interviews, he confessed that during specific times of shooting, he would often deactivate his phone for days on end. He avoided news, entertainment media, and even light-hearted conversations unrelated to the show. It wasn't about shutting people out, he explained, but about protecting the atmosphere I needed to stay in. This conscious act was not estrogen, but a sharp sense of calling, because preparing for playing Jesus was not stepping into a role for Roumie. It was stepping out of himself. Jewish roots of the Last Supper. In preparation for filming the Last Supper scene, the cast of The Chosen participated in a full Passover Seder, led by Jewish rabbi and scholar Jason Sell. Rather than approaching the ritual as a historical reference point or scripted rehearsal, the production created an immersive experience intended to connect the actors with the Jewish roots of the moment they were about to portray. Held in a quiet, intimate setting, the Seder was not framed as a lesson or lecture, but as a living tradition. Cast members sat together around a table set with symbolic elements, following the order of service as it would have been practiced in ancient Jewish households. The experience proved to be a turning point for many in the cast, particularly those unfamiliar with the detailed customs of Passover. The meal included all the traditional items: bitter herbs representing the suffering of slavery, unleavened bread as a symbol of haste, the roasted lamb recalling the original sacrifice, and the 4 cups of wine marking God's promises of deliverance. Rabbi Sell guided them through the reading of the Haggadah, the liturgical text that recounts the Exodus story. It became clear to many actors that what they once understood as a Christian ritual, the Last Supper, was deeply embedded in Jewish tradition. The particulars of this ritual immersion now changed the actors' approaches to what they were soon to enact. Instead of the Last Supper being seen as the last parting between Jesus and his disciples, they began to think of it as a significant moment in a hallowed tradition. Some members of the cast afterwards remarked that the Seder gave them a fresh perspective through which to understand their characters' actions and reactions in the scene. Here were people doing a much weightier search. This was more than just a dinner. It was a deeply reverent, personal, and regimented ritual with roots back to Moses and the Exodus. Thus, the emotional weight of the scene had an additional historical and cultural resonance. Word had it that certain cast members were so moved by the Seder experience that they requested a second private session with Rabbi Sell later in the week. While unconfirmed, these stories reflected the depth of engagement the ritual sparked. More than a preparation exercise, that Passover meal served as a bridge unifying the ancient Hebrew tradition with the continuing story of the Gospels. It enabled the cast to step into the Last Supper not only as actors executing a script, but as participants in a timeless act of remembrance. The 6-day filming experience. The filming of the Last Supper scene in The Chosen unfolded over the course of 6 days, each bringing a deeper level of intensity and emotional depth than the last. The first day began with a standard energy typical of any major production. Cast members took their places, crew set up lighting and cameras, and rehearsals ran smoothly. But even during initial takes, subtle signs of something different began to surface. Unscripted pauses lingered longer than expected, and some glances exchanged between actors carried a quiet weight. Though the lines were rehearsed and the blocking precise, something about the performances began to feel unusually intimate. By the second and third days, the atmosphere on set had shifted into something more subdued. Dialogue between takes became minimal, and the natural flow of the scenes grew quieter and more reflective. Actors who had previously joked during breaks found themselves sitting in contemplative silence instead. Several moments emerged spontaneously, an actor's eyes welling with tears before a cue, a delayed response to a line that gave the moment more gravity than rehearsed. According to crew members, the pace of filming slowed slightly, not due to technical issues, but because the emotional energy demanded more space. Some of the strongest and most appropriate moments to be captured on frame were thus unfolded during the 4th and 5th days. Tears emerged unbidden, silence between lines became deeper, and physical movements appeared to be more intentional. What was once a performance was beginning to feel like a shared experience among the members of the cast. One rumor that went around was that an actor had actually momentarily forgotten they were being filmed, behaving as if the incident were unfolding live. No further directorial input was needed. It appeared as if each member of the ensemble could sense the mood instinctively, honoring the performance in a manner they had never practiced. It ceased to be about precision. It shifted into being about the presence. On the last and sixth day, the crew looked drained emotionally, yet deeply bonded. They were not physically tired, they were spiritually and emotionally tired. The last takes were silent, concentrated, and deeply internal. One crew indicated that the actors were even beginning to touch the bread and wine slowly, like it were a ritual. After the final take, the crew fell into silence, not out of routine, but as if no one wanted to disturb what had been created in the 6 days. For everyone involved, it was not just a shooting schedule. It was an entering into the sacred etched not only on film, but in memory. Roumie at the Eucharistic Congress. Shortly after completing the emotionally taxing filming of the Last Supper scene for The Chosen, Jonathan Roumie made a public appearance at the National Eucharistic Congress, one of the most significant Catholic gatherings in the United States. The timing of his presence at the event, occurring just days after wrapping the deeply symbolic episode, was viewed by many attendees as providential. Standing before thousands, Roumie appeared visibly changed, more reserved, more reflective. There was a stillness in his demeanor that many in the audience noted, a quiet intensity that seemed to carry the weight of something freshly lived rather than merely portrayed. When Roumie took the stage, his words didn't center on performance or career milestones. Instead, he spoke candidly about the spiritual toll and transformation he had undergone. It wasn't acting, it was a surrender, he told the audience. His voice carried a quiet humility as he described how the experience had affected not just his craft, but his relationship with God.
I literally said, God, you take this from me. It's in your hands now. It's not up to me. And I'm not going to worry about it. And I was relieved because I really felt now it wasn't my choice.
He admitted to feeling emotionally emptied by the end of filming, but not in a way that left him depleted. Instead, he said he felt poured out, used for something greater than himself. It wasn't rehearsed, and it wasn't embellished. His testimony came across as deeply personal, spoken more like a confession than a speech. Surely the alignment between the Eucharistic Congress and the Last Supper scene just completed by Roumie was not lost on anyone attending. In Catholic theology, the Last Supper is seen as the institution of the Eucharist. The very foundation upon which the event Roumie was attending is organized. For many who had attended, that unanticipated overlap became a quiet moment of awe. It is said that a couple of clergy present made some comments in private that Roumie's timing was no coincidence. Some of the people present were said to be teary-eyed as he explained how being able to portray Christ at such a defining moment in the gospel had really turned around his inner life. He was not preaching, he was pouring out his heart, and the response was so strong. There was no applause for a celebrity. Rather, audience members rose to their feet in a standing ovation for a man marked visibly by the touch of something sacred. There were no special effects or dramatic gestures, just a raw, honest presence. Afterward, a few people lingered in the auditorium, quietly discussing what they had just witnessed. Roumie, who then walked out freer than an actor promoting a show, left as one who had experienced something deeply transformative. His presence at the Congress felt, for many, like a bridge between art and worship, screen and sacrament. As Roumie stepped off the stage carrying the weight of his experience, a storm of questions was already beginning to swirl far beyond the walls of the auditorium. Debate over authenticity. The aftermath of the Last Supper scene in The Chosen sparked a wave of public reaction that quickly split into two camps: those who believed something miraculous had occurred on set, and those who viewed the moment as an emotionally charged but purely human experience. Supporters flooded social media with heartfelt testimonies, claiming the footage revealed a genuine spiritual moment captured on camera. On the other side, critics accused the production of blurring the line between devotion and performance. At the end of the day, it's a show, one skeptic posted on a popular forum. Emotion doesn't equal divine intervention. Still, the debate gained momentum, especially in Christian media circles and entertainment commentary outlets. Some of the articles on religious blogs called this moment a miracle in the making, while some questioned whether the emotional impetus reported by cast members and crew was being exaggerated to hype up the series. A few critics have even said that the production purposely nurtured these narratives so that it could attract strong attention from faith-based audiences. One of the newspaper editorials said, "It's not manipulation's marketing genius," referring to the way the scene was discussed during post-production interviews. But defenders pushed back hard, stating that the crew and cast were never interested in sensationalizing the moment, but were just sharing their experience. "When something sacred happens, you don't script it," a netizen tweeted in response. Dallas Jenkins and Jonathan Roumie addressed the growing controversy with notable calm. Jenkins, known for his direct and measured communication style, said in an interview, "People are free to doubt. I don't need them to believe me. I only speak from what I witnessed." Roumie echoed that sentiment, stating, "I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm just telling my truth." Neither seemed interested in framing the experience as proof of anything supernatural. Instead, they spoke of it as a deeply personal and meaningful moment that didn't require validation. Rumors even emerged that they had turned down opportunities to promote the scene with more dramatic storytelling, choosing instead to let the footage and testimonies speak for themselves. What was discussed was actually another larger conversation about faith in media, spiritual authenticity, and a hazy area in the middle of performance and personal transformation. Can something on a television show ever be made sacred? Does any of the actor's experience flow into the audience as something that carries spiritual weight? These are the questions being debated by not just fans of The Chosen, but artists, theologians, and skeptics too. The controversy may never lead to a unanimous verdict, but certainly it caused the discussion to leap beyond the realm of entertainment into something more human and even arguably sacred. The broader implications of the Last Supper scene's reception highlight a growing tension in how audiences interpret spiritually themed content in the age of digital storytelling. As lines blur between scripted drama and genuine emotional resonance, viewers are increasingly challenged to distinguish between narrative craftsmanship and moments that feel spiritually significant. This episode from The Chosen inadvertently spotlighted how media can serve as both a mirror and a vessel, reflecting personal beliefs while also shaping new interpretations of faith. In that sense, the controversy becomes less about whether something miraculous happened and more about how art, intention, and reception collide to create meaning in today's media-saturated spiritual landscape. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful moments behind the scenes of The Chosen. And don't stop here. Click on the next video on your screen for another story that will challenge everything you thought you knew.